Welcome, everyone. I'm Jennie Hardin, VP of Brand and Digital Marketing here at ezCater, and I'm excited to welcome you to ezCater's Lunch Break podcast. So over the past 5 episodes, we've been discussing some of the themes that came out of our recently published Future of Workplace Experience report. We've covered everything from workplace friendships to what Gen Z wants from their on-site workplace experience, and now we're wrapping things up by getting into the specifics of the kind of on-site amenities and workspace that today's workers really crave. And so the big question on our minds is, what should companies be thinking about as they design the workplace of the future? And I'm thrilled to have Jess Klay here, a workplace experience strategist, owner of Jess Klay Design, and former VP of Global Workplace Experience at WorkHuman, to help us answer that question and share her thoughts with us. So Jess, welcome. Thank you for being on the Lunch Break podcast.
Thank you, Jennie. I'm thrilled to be here. Thank you so very much.
And before we dive into the meaty topic, I'd love for you to just introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit more about how you approach workplace experience and design.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for the opportunity. Yeah. So I started Jess Klay Design to really hone in on the opportunity around space, culture, and brand. And those 3 things really make a massive difference in workplace experiences. And so when we think back to where things were pre-pandemic, it was really about workspaces, but now it's really about workplaces and how are you creating environments where people belong? And so I started this proprietary method called the GROW method, in which I identify a human-centered framework for organizations to really hone in on their workplace experience for the future.
Nice. And I love what you said. It used to be about the workspace, and now it's about the workplace. And so let's start there because, the workspace typically was all about cubicle culture. And we've been through so many phases of what that workspace looks like, whether it was high walls, closed doors, low walls, open space, shared desks. It's really run the gamut. And what we found in our report is that unsurprisingly, less than 10% of people really see cubicles as the ideal layout for today's workplace. And so that begs the question, if it's not cubicles, what is that ideal layout? And so I'm curious what you're seeing in office design trends and what you think is driving those trends.
It's such a great point, Jennie. And you're absolutely right. It was cubicles. And that's not to say that there's anything wrong with cubicles or open office floor plans. But what we're seeing is an opportunity for choice, and it's actually curated choice. Curated choice means things like thinking about a mix, thinking about layers, thinking about the variety of spaces in which somebody can actually occupy the work environment. And it's really a no one size fits all approach anymore. Back in the day, it was one human, one workspace. One human, one desk. You were able to take and analyze your growth charts, your head count growth, how you were going to grow as an organization, and ideally wrap your workspace around that with, a break room, a tiny little office area for your reception space, as well as ideally the types of meeting spaces for people. And they were very clinical and structured in nature. It was frankly a lot easier back then. But what's super exciting now is we are designing for the future. We're actually designing with the psychological and societal impacts. We are paying attention to neuro-inclusivity. We are paying attention to the different types of generations that are coming into the workplaces, and we're designing for that. And cultures and organizations and brands who want to be employers of choice, who want to drive the very best experiences for their employees, are going to pay attention to that. And it really taps into cognitive well-being. It taps into sensory processing. It's all of those intrinsic things that we learned about ourselves during the pandemic that is actually translating into the offices of the future.
Yeah, and that resonates with me so much because I'm in a hybrid environment. So I have I'm sitting here in my workspace at home, and then I have the opportunity to go into the office when, I want to collaborate with people. I want to see people in person, whatever the motivator may be. And when I'm in the office, I do need that more private, quiet place to do the concentrated, focused work. But then I also want more of an open space to connect with people, whether it's people I work with regularly or people that I don't get to see that often. And so the idea that we're designing, it's not a one for one. It's very messy now when we think about the different types of workplace structures and things like that. And so I can certainly see how that evolution is coming to be and how that's a trend. And so, kind of picking on that thread, I'd love for us to zoom out and now talk about the workplace, because we're seeing the workplace as less of a 9 to 5 grind where you go in, you get your work done, you sit at your desk, and then you go home. It's more of that hub where collaboration is the key and is kind of at the center of that experience. And we found that 60% of workers see collaboration as the primary purpose of the physical office today. And so, I'd love for you to build on kind of what changes you've seen companies make to transform their office into more of that workplace, more of that collaboration hub, and not just a space where you can go and sit at your desk, get your work done, and leave.
You're absolutely right. I think one of the things that we're seeing the most of is, and where I built the first element of the GROW method is grounding in purpose. So when you really pay attention to the intention of the workplace, absolutely, it is a place for collaboration. It's also a place for connection. It's a space for community. And what I love the most about it is thinking about it as a destination. It's actually an opportunity for it to be a place where people remember who they were and who they are when they're together, right? Like, let that sink in for a second. When they're together, it's all of a sudden about the company that you keep. It's about the people surrounding you. It is about that high value connection. And the term around occupancy intelligence, to me, it's a necessary element of it. But I want people to start to think about it not as occupancy, but about identity. When you really think about the purpose of that workspace, you're going there. You want it to be a place to foster that sense of connection and community. Collaboration is an output of it, right? You get to have a very different type of experience when you're there. And when you surround yourself with that brand identity of the organization that you work for and with, you all of a sudden have a more invested sense of purpose for that brand. And that's where I love the notion of being able to use things like the offerings and amenities. And it's everything from you gather around a table, you're breaking bread together, because we all know food is the fastest way to cultivate any sort of community, right? But if you think about it, right, in our own personal lives, like we go to restaurants because it is a sense of community and connection around food. It's in our nature to do that. And I'll take that a step further. One of the things that we're seeing too, curiously, is that with refreshes and rebrands of organizations, when they're thinking about their space, we're seeing a massive uptick in things like environmental graphics, digital storytelling, because they're the people who know are understanding that it truly is that holistic view. It's your offerings, it's your amenities, but you're going there to create a destination as a brand ambassador. Your employees are your very best speakers of your brand. So remind them of the organization, talk to them, let them be part of that sense of community and collaboration, and co-create the spaces with you. That is one of the most incredible ways to start to rethink and reshape the notion of the why. Why are we bringing people back into the office? Well, don't think of it as a mandate. Think of it as an opportunity to foster these things, to really bring these things to life. Because you can certainly have people gather in virtual environments. You can have them gather at an offsite, and you can have them gather at your local coffee shop. However, There is nothing more powerful than being surrounded by the space that lives and breathes your brand values, who you are, and the people that make it all come to life. So I love the idea of looking at it as an opportunity and about the identity element of it versus it being a mandate.
Yeah. And, the idea of creating purpose, and really what I'm hearing you say is the emphasis on experience, right? It's the experience, it's how employees experience each other. It's how they experience the company's values, the company's purpose, the company's brand, and how you can create, again, not only just a place where they can go, but a true destination, a true experience. And, oftentimes we find that when you can have that human connection, when you can create that community, that it's not just somebody in another screen that you're trying to get work done with, but you are ideally rallied around the shared goal. There's commonality there. There's somebody outside of just their identity of their 9 to 5 or whatever their title may be. And ideally, you can progress towards that shared goal a little bit faster because you have that community and that connection. And so I think that's so interesting. It's so representative of where we're headed, kind of in our generation as things change. And so I'm curious, when we think about, really creating that experience and how we shape the workspace around, or the workplace around that, I imagine social spaces are also a big component of that. Outdoor areas, you brought up food, which I certainly love to talk about. We love it at ezCater, different types of eating areas. So what kinds of creative changes do you predict for the workplace experience of the future so that organizations can really lean into creating that purpose and bringing it to life through their physical space?
It's so amazing, that power of the outdoors. It's so amazing, the power of connection to natural light. It's so powerful, right? You actually naturally feel different in spaces when you have access to those things. And you're absolutely right. People are asking for what used to be considered a luxury. It used to be considered things like, oh, well, if you had an outdoor patio or a balcony, wow, you had an amazing real estate portfolio. Or if you had a desk that was seated next to a window, it was considered you were a high-ranking person within an organization. And if you think about how different and almost how silly that sounds today, right? It wasn't that long ago. So I think that it's important for us to also pay attention to the needs of the people by analyzing the data. So ask your people, but then be curious and really figure out the why behind it. So I often use this example. If you were to ask somebody off the street on a very, very hot day, and you would say, what would make your office amazing today and get you into that space today? They would say a swimming pool, right? So naturally, unless you're in the fitness industry, but naturally, most organizations aren't willing to invest in a swimming pool inside of their office. But if you think about the why, their natural inclination was to say, well, I want to be cool, refreshed. I want to be outside. I feel a sense of X, Y, and Z because it's hot outside, right? And so you can leverage that data. And workplace strategists are exceptional at figuring out like the layers behind the story and to say, okay, but what do they really mean? And then how do we design for that, right? So it may not be a swimming pool, but rather they're looking for a place for respite. They're looking for a place for, maybe it's when they mean swimming pool, they mean a community pool. Maybe they want to have pool parties and exciting spaces, or maybe they want a tiny, tranquil pond environment where they're looking for the sound of natural water and waterfalls. And they really are looking for that space to be a place for solitude, right? So that is where I often find it so exciting to read between the lines. When you think about the notion of biophilic design, it's been this thing that has been like threaded throughout for so many years. And I'm a huge champion of it. I'm a huge champion of bringing in natural elements, earth elements, because we're the humans occupying the space. So what better way to actually even bring some of that nature inside of your physical environment? It makes the workplace that much more special. And yes, it includes plants. Yes, it includes access to natural light. Leverage those things if you can. And it's an important critical psychological element for humans to connect with that. Plus there's benefits of it. You get the oxygenation, you get the vitamin D, you get all of these things through that. But it's that very special way of thinking differently around sensory experiences. And when I go back to thinking and talking about what we were talking about at the beginning of the hour around neuro-inclusive, there are many people who need that variety. They also need as much stimulation as they need destimulation. They need to have a chair that does not scratch their skin because of sensory experiences. They may be slightly adverse to sound that in an open office environment may not be conducive for them to create their best work. And actually, it could become a massive detractor for them personally because they're afraid. And they're afraid to speak up. So when I think about spaces and how do we make these spaces feel something for those humans coming into the space, think of it as like your well-being index for your employees. It's not another checkbox in your real estate portfolio. It actually becomes a cultural lever and a tool in your toolkit to say, we're creating this place for emotional regulation for you. We're creating this space for informal mentoring because it's not sitting in a classroom, a forced environment. You can have those water cooler moments in a tiny little corner somewhere that we're specifically designing for that space, for that type of interaction, right? And I feel so strongly about us being able to do that because this is how the next generations of our workforce have been wired. They have exposure to things that my generation didn't and the generations before me. They have exposure to the self-awareness and the tools that they can actually bring to the table. They have exposure to feel certain ways and to have a voice about that. And we didn't have that. So as designers, it's incumbent upon us to do that and to share that information with the leaders who are making the decisions about the investment so that they are championing the growth of their organization. Because I've not met one C-suite executive who says, actually, Jess, I don't want our company to grow. Right. I actually just want it to remain stagnant. Or actually, I'm just looking for us to regress. Now, you're growing. And you're growing for future generations. So let's pay attention to them and design for them.
That's fascinating. Thinking about it, I think it's such an innovative take when we think about designing for the well-being of the employee. And I could even just feel my shoulders kind of naturally relax as you're talking about creating these environments where, you can de-stimulate and you can regulate and, there's oxygenation and natural light and the outdoors. And, it definitely makes me want to rethink my basement office space here. But one of the themes that I heard you say throughout our conversation is this idea of co-creation. And I know that you're a big believer in that workplace experience doesn't start with furniture, it starts with strategy. And so talk to me a little bit about how you bring that co-creation to life to invite your employees in and how you help guide your clients to start with that strategy and not just the chair where they can relax. Because, if it's a lovely chair in a very desolate environment, it's really not going to do anything for your workplace experience.
That's right. That's right. And I think that's where the growth really happens, right? Mm-hmm. And that's where I created the GROW method because it really starts with that grounding in purpose. When people stop thinking about the process of the nature of looking at their real estate portfolio as an occupancy piece of their portfolio, and they really leveraging that space and that investment in their employees, the narrative totally shifts, right? Just like you have in your organization, you're building out your teams. You have your accounting teams, you have your HR teams, you have your marketing teams, you have your product teams, you have your service teams, you have all these different teams. Think about how different each one of those teams are in a space, right? Think about the different needs of those people.
Mm-hmm.
So if organizations and the buyers or the stakeholders are just looking at it through the lens of dollars and cents or real estate investment, you're missing the mark. So think about your brand, think about the company, think about what you want your company to do and how you want it to grow. Grounded in some purpose, then understand your brand values, reflect that brand in the space itself, co-create the space with your employees so that you're orchestrating this alignment together. You have each one of those key areas of your organization coming to the table to help create the space.
Mm-hmm.
They're giving you feedback. They're giving you insights into what and how is going to make them work the very best inside of your organization. The last one is like weaving those stories into the space. Everybody has a history. Somebody, whether you are the smallest organization or the largest organization in the world, you started somewhere. Share that history with people. Weave those stories in. Ensure that people understand who you are so that you're naturally creating this sense of ambassadorship inside of your organization. It's not just about the customers or the prospects who walk through your front doors. It's actually about the employees, because you want your employees to be the ones that at a company party, just as much as at their local barbecue, can articulate who you are and what they are doing inside of your organization that makes them proud. The last one, which is why the GROW method is GROWE and doesn't stop at the W, is embed and involve. You have to make these things part of your space, but it always has to evolve. It always has to. Change is inevitable. We humans evolve every single day. We as society evolve every single day. Organizations evolve every single day. And there are so many different influencers to bring that to life, good and bad. So the last piece for me is really just thinking forward. It's never a set it and forget it anymore. So I encourage people, when they're thinking about, what do I do with my space? I really think I need to bring employees back into the office. Don't put out an RFP about furniture.
Right.
Don't put out an RFP asking about the simplicity of just bringing in a fitness guru to just do a yoga session. Think of the holistic picture. Use it as a tool and a lever. And then all of the rest of the pieces will fall into place. And ideally, that's where the value adds of people such as myself, who are workplace strategists and designers. Like, we want to understand your brand. We want to understand your purpose, your goals, because it truly is a reflection, and you can use it as a tool that will really gain some incredible ROI.
Absolutely. And I think, it's worth noting that this is not just an approach for a hybrid environment. It can be an approach for those, certainly an approach for those who are fully in office as well.
Absolutely.
And I want to, the E part, the evolution. I think that's certainly what we've seen on the ezCater side when we think about the evolution of space and the evolution of how employers want to provide food to their employees. And it hits back on that well-being. You mentioned this idea of coming together around creating community collaboration, breaking bread. Food can really be a tool to drive that and productivity. So I'd be remiss to not spend a moment on that, because we've noticed in the reopening of some offices, companies are looking at how they reimagine their space and how they repurpose it. Some are choosing not to reopen cafeterias. They're looking for a more flexible solution, whether that's to reduce their office footprint or reduce overhead costs, manage to fluctuating headcounts, because, like you said, they don't have that predictability of one person at one desk in the office every day. And so I'm curious if you can shed a little light on some of these space trends you're seeing, maybe as it relates to food, but feel free to go broader too, and just dig into that a little bit.
Oh, I love it. Food's one of my favorite topics ever. That's why I'm
mine
just thrilled
too.
to be here.
Why, yeah.
I know. I can't wait to have lunch with you. So one of the things that you could really leverage your offerings and amenities through food in a very subtle way. So when you think about organizations' structure, right? So let's start with the space first, okay? Go back, close your eyes, and think about when you see and hear the word break room, what do you think of? You think of something I think of, but I think most people do as well, a isolated area in the back of a factory that has no windows. It has, a perfunctory gray wall. It has a clock. It has some sort of punch card. It's got your obligatory documents on the wall around safety and OSHA and all those types of things. Maybe a microwave, maybe a tiny fridge, and a couple of paper plates and napkins, and probably a coffee machine. Maybe a few tables to just accommodate a small group of people. That experience is horrific to me.
And for what it's worth, that's also what comes to mind for me too. I worked in retail for a period of time. And so it's the tables, the chairs, the TV on the wall, definitely the policy compliance documents. Like I can literally picture it and picture myself sitting there. It's a very visceral memory.
Yes. But notice my body language and notice your body language. When we were talking about that, it was like shrunken. I felt very like, I didn't feel anything. I felt like it wasn't a good feeling. It was actually like something off to the side. We're humans. Humans need to eat. We need to nourish our bodies in order for us to be able to both physically and mentally operate in a workplace environment. So why wouldn't we naturally help with that? Why wouldn't organizations naturally provide something like that? And if we also think about the power of choice, you may order something very different off a menu than I would order off a menu when we go to a restaurant. It's highly unlikely that we would order the same thing because we are two different types of humans. We have different cultural backgrounds. We have different dietary needs. We have different types of allergens potentially. We have differences in tastes. We also are unique individuals. So what I'm seeing happening and what most of us are designing for these days are not those break rooms of the past. Rather, leveraging food as a sense of opportunity for connection and community, and creating just as much larger spaces for that gathering, in addition to variety of options. So we've seen everything from instituting organizations such as ezCater into spaces so that there is that power of choice. That's their constant sense of flexibility. It's that evolution, right? Because tastes change, dietary things evolve, and people are unique. You're also seeing more and more people, while they may not have the more of what you would consider a traditional type of cafeteria experiences, they're actually not going away either. Some organizations are bringing in more of a hybrid type of experience. They're bringing in a barista once a week. That is a specialty experience. Think about what that does. That actually changes the RTO of a Tuesday mandate into an experience because you get a specialized barista on site. Or when you're there, you have an opportunity to order from a variety of different places and have them delivered or created an on-site experience that you wouldn't otherwise have. It actually is making life a lot easier and more experiential for those employees. Because for a lot of us who had an opportunity to work from home for a considerable amount of time during the pandemic, we got very used to making our own food. We got very used to ordering in takeout. We got very used to having things easily and readily available to us. And if you want to create that destination driver within your proverbial four walls, give them that opportunity. And then create the space so that people can actually have lunch meetings together and not feel as if it's that old break room experience you only eat in the back corner. Rather, Oh, you have a poke bowl today? Well, I brought shawarma. So let's sit together and let's discuss the differences between what we're eating. Or we're actually both getting Greek salads today. Well, let's talk about why we both love Greek salads. I just find it like such a great way for you to have an experience that cultivates that type of connection. When I mentioned earlier, there's some overt ways you can also leverage this. Do things like a lunch and learn. A lunch and learn will actually drive engagement as well. Not only will food create that destination driver, but leverage it for an opportunity to talk about something very interesting. It could be something about what's happening in your organization. It could be something that is very topical based on your employee feedback, something that is worrisome to them. It could be something about their benefits. It could be something about what's happening culturally if there was a merger and acquisition. You can really do things a little bit differently to think about the opportunity to leverage both space and environments into an experience.
Yeah. And you're hitting on a few themes that we talk about a lot at ezCater. We've seen ourselves, which is this, the evolution of individual preferences or consumer preferences and behaviors, right? We did get used to ordering food from restaurants, whether that be to our home or elsewhere. There's certainly this rise of personalization and individualism because there's this expectation that we can get exactly what we want when we order it. And so whether it's a dietary preference, an allergy, or just simply driven by our own taste or backgrounds, definitely seeing that as an emerging theme that's leading employees to seek out these food perks, ask their organizations for these food perks where they have control of what they order versus having the same, maybe like 10 or so options from the cafeteria.
Right.
And then using that as a point in which you can bring people together, get them in the same room so you can communicate that vital information as a lunch and learn or something like that. And so it's definitely something that we've seen in our business too. And why, we've seen that 78% of employees say that that daily or weekly employee meal improves their overall workplace experience because it's hitting on their well-being. It's, giving them the opportunity to personalize, and it's hitting on kind of the evolving consumer behavior that they have at home. So, I find it really fascinating just how all of these elements come together and how you're combining them into this overall strategy for organizations too.
You can actually even leverage elements such as food as destinations within the space too. So there's a really interesting pilot that I had conducted in which, there was a dormant area within the space, and it would have been an incredible investment to rectify that space because we didn't quite have enough data to understand like why people weren't utilizing that space. So try something, experiment with something, make it a candy store.
Yeah.
Make it something that is, or a gluten-free area, or make it something that is a unique experience where you leverage that as an opportunity for co-creation, conversation, and that sense of community in your workplace. You'd be surprised. I would love to see, if I set up a gluten-free area of a space, to see all the different types of people come over. And not only would you get the different types of people who need to have a gluten-free experience, you're going to also hear the people who have other needs,
right,
who potentially weren't able or didn't feel like they had a voice. So now you're going to find out the people who suffer from diabetes. You're going to find the people who are allergic to peanuts. You're going to find a variety of different types of things. Again, I'm coming down to like little tiny tactics here. But what that does is that also helps the employees have a voice.
Yes.
Because they may not feel like they fit in if they can't participate in the pizza party. And they may not feel like they can fit in at the happy hour that you're conducting because they no longer drink alcohol for a personal or physical choice. So when you really think about the diverse population of employees You have to think differently. And it is not one size fits all. Places like your teams and what ezCater's doing, that personalization, that variety, that opportunity for the choices, it's absolutely imperative for organizations to think about it that way. And if you don't, you will find faster than you want the negative implications of not paying attention to those things. Truly, the loudest voices will be the ones who are very unhappy with their workplace experience. And that is where you will see a massive decline in your scores, because people love to voice their opinions anonymously. So why not co-create the spaces with them and give them those opportunities to speak their mind?
Yeah, and some of the worst cases, you might see it in your growth or lack thereof too, right? I mean, if you're really missing the mark there and you're squandering this opportunity to create a growth driver with your workplace experience, it really could hit the bottom line too.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You'll see it in your engagement scores. You'll see it on, those anonymous sites where people want to give their feedback. Your reviews will be very reflective of your workplace experience. And actually, it's oftentimes one of the levers that we, the strategists, use to validate an ROI investment. An ROI with the investments that they're making in workplace experiences, because typically it's one of those questions that gets asked in some of the awards or recognition platforms. Was my environment safe? Did I feel both physically safe, psychologically safe? Was it a great place to come into? These are actual questions that get asked in these surveys. And if it's constantly reflecting that it's a negative experience, it brings the whole average down. It really is something that companies should be leveraging as a attractor and investing in it just as much as they would invest in other types of benefits.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And so, what I'm taking away from this is, you start with your purpose, you start with your brand, what you stand for, your values, you use that to inform your strategy, just not this, kind of disparate collection of tactics or furniture, or, really think about it holistically and how you design this workplace experience, co-create with your employees, make their voice heard, and focus on well-being, that inclusivity factor, giving employees the ability to personalize, focus in on that individualism, but also create this community type of experience as well.
That's right. That's right. In the days of meeting corporate goals, you can leverage your workplace experience to align with your sustainability goals, with your DE&I efforts, with your retention and engagement scores, your bottom line, frankly. And I think that when you engage with somebody like a workplace strategist, we look at the entire picture, and that's critically important as part of your investment to your brand, your culture, and your employees.
Without a doubt. And so before we wrap, I have to ask, anything else we didn't cover? Any hot takes or predictions you have about where the future of the workplace experience is going? There's been chock full of insights, and I could continue talking for hours, but I know that I won't. We can do that over lunch. We'll definitely schedule a time. But yeah, where do you think this is all going? Any hot takes you have or predictions for the future?
I would love to say, I think that there's obviously there's a huge influx of AI, and there's a lot of fear around AI. When we think about how that will impact the workplaces and the workspaces, it actually is going back to that designing for a human-centered experience. We are the humans. We still occupy space. We do still show up to work. We do still have those things. Leveraging things like AI as a tool in your toolkit is inevitable, right? For the majority of us. So I think negating the fear aside of things, I think that that's one thing that we can actually be very mindful and plan for. I also do want people to, and I'm seeing because of that AI and because the high investment and the almost like the importance that's put on the technology, it has strengthened the bond for human to human connection. It actually has created a more recognition for it and people really looking for those opportunities. And so that's where I see us being able to leverage things like food, biophilic elements, sensory experiences to create those high value destinations through our workplaces, designing for those, being very flexible with those, rising with the tides, being sure that we're taking into consideration a larger population, and making that investment in your humans will make a big, big difference towards the future of work for the growth of your organization.
That's great. I mean, AI could be a whole other episode, so maybe that's our part 2 at another time. But thank you, Jess, for such a great discussion. For those who want to continue the conversation with you, how can they get in touch?
Well, you can reach out to me directly at jessklay.com. I'm very active on LinkedIn. You can find me under Jess Klay. And any and all ways, I'm available to talk and to chat about things. Clearly, this is a huge passion of mine. I feel very, very strongly about the future of work when it comes to workplace environments and experiences where people really feel like they belong.
I love that. I love that so much.
You.
And it's Jess Klay, Klay. We'll certainly link it in our copy and everywhere. And thank you so much for being here. We really appreciate it. If you're watching on YouTube or listening on a podcast app, we have links to a number of other resources that you can check out to learn more about these insights and the future of the workplace experience. It includes our new report, some really helpful other types of content, and different ways that you can reach out to me or someone at ezCater to talk more about what we do here and how food is becoming a central part of the workplace experience. So stay tuned for more great conversations, more data and insights that we'll bring to you from ezCater and other thought leaders in this industry to find out what people really think and really want when it comes to their workplace. So thank you again, Jess. It's been a pleasure and can't wait to continue the conversation.
Thank you, Jennie. Look forward to our lunch.
Likewise.